Okay, so hello everyone. First, I'm going to go share the screen here. And we first want to welcome everyone. We know there's people from around the world attending and watching this. So we're very, very thankful that you guys are here and part of this panel. We're just going to do is we're going to go through a few slides, just kind of give you a little background, and then we'll jump right into the heart and the meat of the panel. But we wanted to kind of just start off first with, obviously, you've RSVP'd, and know what the panel's about, but the reason we kind of put this one together, and Jen and I were talking even like last summer and to quite a few people is, it's been tough times. I mean, this entire COVID and pandemic and quarantine has been really, really tough on the industry. And, talking to quite a few people, people are saying, look, theaters are shut, productions are shut, whether it's for film or television. How do we get projects going? And what was really interesting too is to see that a lot of animation at least was able to get going and still continue, because people with animation can at least work and produce from laptops from home, from computers, which is very tough still, but at least those can keep on moving forward. And people are coming and saying, well, should we convert our live action to animation, or how does that work? And so there's a lot of questions around it, just around animation. How does that work? And so we wanted to make sure that we kind of put together a panel and address this, because there were really great questions. And our entire goal is to make our community stronger and getting stories out there, with live action and animation and so on. And we've never done one on animation, so this is a really good opportunity to do so. So what we wanted to first of all is thank the Writers Guild Foundation for hosting us, and they've been a wonderful partners over the years. And I wanted to pass it over to Anid here, who from the Writers Guild Foundation, who could explain this wonderful organization so much better than Jennifer and I can ever do. So Anid, do you want to just give a little background about the Writers Guild?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Michael. And thank you everybody for being here today. If you're new to the Writers Guild Foundation, we are a nonprofit organization, and our mission is to preserve and promote the history and craft of writing for the screen. We do this in 3 ways. The first is through our library and archives, which are obviously closed right now due to the pandemic, but we do host bi-weekly free library live Zoom sessions every Tuesday and Thursday. There you can ask our librarians questions about scripts, write alongside other writers, and hear from guest speakers. We're going to have a few great ones over the next few weeks. The second way we pursue our mission is through our events, featuring film and TV writers, as well as executives, and our partnerships, such as this one with Business of Creating. We've hosted over 40 or 45 or so, I can't even keep track, Zoom panels over the last few months. And you can view most of them along with our other past events on our YouTube channel. And lastly, we manage community outreach programs such as our Veterans Writing Project and Visiting Writers Program, which connects working writers with underserved communities, as well as schools and colleges for mentorship and speaking opportunities. If you'd like more information on the library, our events, community programs, please visit our website at wgfoundation.org. Sign up for our weekly newsletter. That's where we announce all our events first, or follow us on social. We're on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Thanks so much.
Anid, thank you. Actually, it reminds me, next time we need to put your URL on the bottom of the slide. Remind me, so we can get promote people to look at that. Awesome. Thank you. Okay, so moving on, just to give a little background about the Business of Creating. For those who are familiar with us already, you've probably seen our smiling faces here. Jennifer and I are the co-founders of Business and Creating, and we're just very, very proud of putting this together, but mainly because of all the collaboration of everyone you'll see here, but also for everyone who's been able to attend these. And again, it really is about creating opportunities for content creators, and across film, TV, and digital. We'll talk more about how you can contact us, but we actually have the information below, the slide here. One of the key things, that we want to make sure that happens with these virtual panels, usually when we add them in person, people get to meet each other and network, right? It's harder to do so now, and everything is through these screens. So, it's like, how do you do this with a virtual way? So thankfully, thanks to Zoom and the Writers Guild Foundation, there's 2 things you should be noticing on either the top or bottom of your screen. There's a chat function and there's a QA function. For the chat function, we definitely encourage you to introduce your name, where you're from, what you do, and that's where we encourage you to kind of interact with one another, and really it is about, we want to make this creative industry stronger. It's stronger because we all help each other. It is a collaborative process. This is a relationship business, right? So please talk to one another, get to know each other in the chat rooms. I know it's not in person, unfortunately, and someday we'll get past all this and we'll be able to do so too. But, please introduce yourselves. The one thing to note though, is if you want to ask Q&A questions specifically to the panelists, and you're like, hey, Jen, who's moderating it, like, what's going on? It's like, do it in the Q&A portion of it. So that's the difference between the two that you'll see there. The chat, say hi, Q&A directly to the panel. Okay, so we've done 18 so far. I think this is Jen, this is 19, right? Yeah, so we have 19. This is the 19th, but we've covered multiple topics, everything from unit photography to how do you do sizzle pieces and Ripple-matics, to financing and developing projects, to PR and digital. If you ever have any thoughts of ideas of panel ideas, feel free to let us know. We're always looking for ideas, and many of these panels come from what other people have told us that they would like to learn more about. So always feel free to just talk to us about that. So having said that, we think we're getting into the panel itself. And I'm going to throw it over to my dear colleague and co-founder, Jennifer Mangan, who, by the way, in her own right, is not just a wonderful person, but also a writer and producer, and is going to be the moderator of this entire panel, and is just phenomenal. And I just can't say enough wonderful things about Jennifer and her expertise, as well as her skills and creativity.
Oh, Michael, thank you. I'm kind of sad we only have an hour right now, so you could keep going. That would be fun.
You're like, bring it on.
Oh, Michael, such a generous person, you guys. Hey, all right, you guys. Look who we have here to come play in our professional sandbox. First up, everybody, let's welcome Jill Gilbert. Everybody's applauding. Hey, Jill. Everybody, Jill is a senior level entertainment executive, over 20 years experience. She has spearheaded over 50 animation projects for such companies as Walt Disney Company, Paramount Animation, Luma Pictures, and PSYOP. She's the owner of JFG Consulting, where she works with clients to create and build development infrastructure, provide development services, develop go-to-market strategies, scout for talent, and produce animated content. Her clients include Epic Games, Supercell, Baobab Studios, Moonbug Entertainment, and others. She's a very busy, knowledgeable woman. Now, in 2018, she and one of our other amazing speakers, Alison Mann, they founded the BRIC Foundation. I bet everybody's going to write this one down. BRIC Foundation, which is committed to opening new access points for women and people from underrepresented groups in the entertainment industries. They are a growing force in the industry's diversity and inclusion movement. Again, that's BRIC. Their recent BRIC 2020 Talent and Innovation Summit was attended by 150 plus industry thought leaders and decision makers. And outside the industry, Jill, along with her co-founder Alison, designed and realized the BRIC Creative Academy to provide underserved high school students with hands-on experience creating content. Welcome, Jill. Next up, we have the amazing Tarik Heitmann. Tarik is raised in Hamburg, Germany, and graduated from UCLA. Hey, shout out. Tarik is the founder of Kinetic Media, which is a management and production company here in Los Angeles. Prior to being a manager, he was an agent at just a little small place called ICM Partners. You might have heard of that. He works with international directors, writers, and IP holders. He now represents many clients in both live action and animation. Among his clients are John Stevenson from Kung Fu Panda, Tony Cervone from Scoob, Ben Hibben from Star Trek Prodigy, Carlos Stevens from The Alchemist Letter, Kevin Adams and Joe Sander from Next Generation, and Axis Studios from Lost in Oz, among many others. Everybody, let's welcome Tarik Heitmann.
Such such an underachiever, such an underachiever. I swear.
Right? And we only have an hour. I'm sad, you know. Next up, we have Aghi Ko. Everybody give a round of applause for Aghi. Aghi is the VP of Development for DreamWorks TV, where she oversees development and series based on existing IP and original IP. Now, before being at DreamWorks TV, she worked for Nickelodeon, where she was responsible for supervising the production and development of Nickelodeon's animated and live-action preschool series. Aghi previously served 10 years at Universal Studios as VP of Development and Production for the company's Kids and Family Unit. Over the course of her career, she was instrumental in establishing Universal Studios' foothold in original kids content and led the development and production on the animated TV series Curious George, as we know is on PBS. Aghi also managed the studio's non-theatrical brands, including The Land Before Time, The Little Engine That Could, and the Curious George movies. Additionally, she was an executive producer on the Walt Disney theatrical movie, The Princess and the Frog. Everybody, let's welcome Aghi Ko.
Yes.
All right, next up after that, we have Karen Malach. Everybody, I'm just like, I'm swallowing my own tongue with all these awesome people here. Karen Malach is an Emmy and Gracie Award-winning producer now at Sony Pictures Animation, currently producing Young Love, the series spin-off from the Academy Award-winning short Hair Love. Previous projects when she was at Nickelodeon include The Loud House, The Casagrandes, Fairly Odd Parents, and The Legend of Korra. Karen specializes in international co-productions with foreign animation studios. Everybody, let's welcome Karen.
Karen.
And now we have Alison Mann. Alison is the VP of Creative Strategy at Sony Pictures Animation. She's responsible for managing the development and talent for the studio's feature film, international, and series-based projects. She collaborates with business affairs, recruiting, and the creative team to foster new relationships with key creatives within the animation industry. Through her 17 years in the industry, she's gained experience in TV, film, and gaming. While working at Walt Disney Animation Studios, Zynga, Disney Interactive, Paramount Pictures Animation, and Illumination Entertainment. Now, as we mentioned briefly, Alison and Jill are the co-founders and the CEOs of the BRIC Foundation, B-R-I-C, an organization set up to solve how to create new access points for women and people of underrepresented groups so they can excel at creative leadership and to enable culture change through engaging and empowering talent. Everybody, let's welcome Alison Mann. And finally, my partner in education, it's Michael Fisk. Michael is my co-founder here for our Business of Creating panel series. He's a senior marketing executive in the entertainment industry. Check this out, having spearheaded over 400 marketing campaigns for studios like Sony Pictures, Lionsgate, NBC Universal, Warner Brothers, and currently for MGM. He also runs InterMark, which is the international consulting practice, focusing on helping filmmakers, producers, directors, and distributors with long-term marketing and strategy. His passion is making your passion project succeed. Fun fact, some of his favorite campaigns that he's worked on are the James Bond franchises. Yeah. He's been working on the last 5 of those, La La Land, and most recently, just about to come out, Breaking News in Yuba County, directed by Tate Taylor, starring Allison Janney, Regina Hall, Mila Kunis, Juliette Lewis, Awkwafina, and more. This is coming out. It looks hilarious, by the way. Coming in theaters and digital on February 12th. Everybody, let's welcome Michael.
Thank you, Jen. And I feel like Alice and Karen, we never crossed paths at Sony, I don't think. So it's like, it's always good to see former, or at least Sony people who are still there. That's wonderful.
Crossing now.
Yes, yes, we are.
Okay, so yeah, our first main question here, I love that we have a visual to go with this. How is animation different from live action? You mean they're not the same? What? Tell me more.
Yeah, well, I'll jump in. I love this slide because it really kind of illustrates the difference in process. In this country, animation is perceived many times as a genre, but it's really just a filmmaking technique. And that's kind of what this slide illustrates, is it shows the process and how it's different from live action. And the biggest difference is that in animation, we essentially are making our content in pre-production. So you're making your decisions by storyboarding out your content. That's where you're designing your characters, and you're having to make a lot of really important decisions early on, because the production phase is really about realizing those decisions. And it doesn't mean that there may not be changes, but unlike live action, where you're actually making your content in post-production and figuring out, not that you haven't figured out your story, but really the editing process in post is how live action is really made. In animation, it happens much earlier. And as you can see, our post-production is actually quite short because it's just about scoring and doing final mix. So that's kind of the biggest difference, but it means that you have to really think about a lot of your choices early on, because they're going to affect how you actually produce your content later on. I don't know if any of my fellow panelists want to chime in there too.
No, you got it. That is the biggest difference. Like you just said, the editorial process in live action is where everything comes together. And in animation, we know right after we're done with our animatic, that becomes the blueprint for the episode or the movie. And so we make everything up front. And then it goes into for execution into the animation phase. I mean, there are a lot of, things will shift and change during animation, but for the most part, we know what we're making. We know what we're going to get by the time we hit post.
Hey, Jill and Karen, because from this sheet, it's really helpful seeing, kind of like where post-production compared to, animation versus live action and so on. Here, it seems like it only takes, let's say, a year's worth, but would you say that animation takes longer, it's a longer time frame in between, or is it less? Do you want to just talk about that here?
Jill, do you want me to?
Yeah, go for it, Karen.
I know. Yeah, I mean, for example, when we make a television series in animation, we're talking about probably, depending on the number of episodes ordered, it's usually about a 2-year process to get this, let's say, 20 episodes done. In live action, and correct me if I'm wrong, I believe it sort of happens much more quickly. The process is much faster overall. Would you agree with that, Jill?
Yeah, that sounds about right. I mean, in an animated film, that could take 2.5 years, where it could take 4 and beyond. Yeah. It could take 7 years. It just depends on your tolerance for how long you want to figure out what your movie is before you put it into production. Because the thing is that once you send your content into production, you're really spending significant dollars. You don't want to produce something that you're going to ultimately throw out. So you have to be really certain about what it is that you want to make. Now, some studios, some places have that luxury. They can take 7 years to figure out their story and then to put it through the production process. But it can also be done in 2 years if you want to be smart about it, if you want to be smart and efficient.
I'll just say too, is that, particularly from a marketing side, when marketers were always looking for content, from animators. And we've made the mistake of, after the film's been done, we're like, oh, can we get this? And, like Jill, like you laugh at this, very often they're like, well, we have to kind of bring everyone back in. We have to kind of do everything. And the costs are so much more astronomical than if it was done either, the asks are done in pre-production or during production, because you have all the animators and everything there together, because they're all disbanded right afterwards.
Right. But for a movie, what you end up many times doing is you send the movie into production out of order. So you will identify certain sequences in animation. A scene is called a sequence. You would send certain things that have been approved sooner, but maybe like the big dance number we're having a lot of problems with, or our big action finale, so that will be held back. So it gets animated out of order. And in that sort of early request, you may ask for certain marketing pieces. Like Michael may say, I really want this amazing moment of the alien, you know, looking up at the stars, because that'll be perfect for our marketing campaign. So you'll send that early on into the production pipe.
Yep.
I asked a question about the difference between like a 2D and CG pipeline. And the biggest difference, like they're pretty much equal. The biggest difference is the time that it takes to create the models in ZBrush or Maya and then rig them. So there's just kind of this extra step that on the technology front that you wouldn't necessarily have on the 2D side.
Good point.
Before I move off, any other question? I think there's a question in the Q&A. Is the sequence, maybe this is Jill, is the sequence the same as a scene, or is a sequence a scene? I think they were trying to see if that's the same. What's the terminology?
So a scene, so let's say we have the scene of the movie in the coffee shop of us all talking about our COVID experiences. That's a scene. In animation, that would be called a sequence.
Which is just a bunch of shots that are connected, right?
Cool. Okay, I think, Jen, should we move on? Is that?
Absolutely. One thing I was just finding interesting was how the different departments are still working together in similar time frames, whether it seems to be live action or animation, where Michael, you're saying, yeah, even for animation, we need to be in right away with the marketing, as opposed to, you know, after the fact. You still need to get those same key shots, etc.
Yeah.
Okay, look at our hair, love. Okay, well, and we already started talking a little bit about this. So is producing an animated show different than a live action show? And then are there differences, film versus, you know, TV series, kids versus adults? I need to know what's it like? How do we produce the animated show? And what's the compare and contrast for live action?
I can jump in here if you want me to.
Please, everybody.
As Jill mentioned earlier, everything is produced, you know, upfront in animation as opposed to live action. But another facet of that is that, you know, and the beauty of animation, and this is obviously changing in the live action world, but we're not held to the constraints of real world things. Like we have a lot of creative flexibility in the animation space because we can create whatever we can draw. If you can draw it, we can make it. That's the simplest answer, I think.
Perfect.
Yeah. Hey, Michael, the PowerPoint disappeared from our screen. I'm not sure.
Yeah, no, I just did it so we can see each other, but I'll pop it back up. Yes.
Okay.
Tough call which one we want to go with. So then is it different producing animated film versus animated television, kids to adults?
Yeah, I mean, I again, on the film side, the main difference between series and film is money and time. Right.
Yes, please.
But you know, I mean, the process is a little different. I mean, there's similarities and differences all throughout, but for the most part, we have far less time in series production. We don't have flexibility of, you know, a lot of back and forth. We have to be we have to live within a little bit more restrictive space because we have to get a show on the air. So we're held to air dates. I know films are held to release dates, but those seem to me, again, somebody can jump in here, there might be more flex there, you know, and then just the process, it just takes a lot longer to get through.
And let me see. And now, you know, looking at it, because we've got studio people, we've got independent people that we're talking to here. We've got, you know, everybody, you know, it's a brilliant Venn diagram of animated people. Is there much difference producing with the indie companies versus the big studios? Do you have, you know, more flexibility, less, you know, how is there a big difference? I'm thinking that would be good to check in with Jill and maybe Tarik on that, since
Yeah,
we're-
I can answer
Yeah.
some of this stuff. I mean,
Yes,
in
please.
terms of independent companies, and probably Karen can attest to that, a lot of independent movies, specifically coming out of Europe, are dictated by taxes and tax incentives in different territories. I mean, if you're looking at some of the films like Dragon Rider, which was a German film that was produced by Constantine, they had to get financing out of Germany, part of it out of Belgium, Spain. So you're somewhat limited in the artistic vision sometimes, because a certain component of it might have to be done in a certain country. I mean, character designs would have to be done in Brazil or in Belgium or in different places to access those kind of funds. If you're dealing with a studio, a lot of those things get thrown out a lot of times because the funding either comes through the studios. Obviously, they will try to get tax incentives out of certain countries where labor force is, but I think that's a secondary concern. It's not how they tend to usually make those movies. And now with Netflix and the streamers, it could be a combination of both. So you can have pre-sales or certain commitments by somebody like Netflix or Amazon, and then the other component comes out of the individual countries. So I don't think there is a formula like it used to be before. I think everything is changing in this marketplace, but that's kind of my assessment.
Wonderful. And a quick side question, which actually is in like, slide 15 or something. But when we're talking about using local workforce in Belgium or wherever, does that also include the voiceover talent?
Absolutely. I would say
okay.
absolutely.
Yeah.
That has a lot to do with it as well. It depends on how their tax bases for certain production are set up.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it actually adds to the flavor of the show too, to be honest.
Uh-huh.
So I'll jump in about a bit about producing animated content here with some of the big studios, and I'm actually going to throw it to Aghi and to Alison, because in the US, at many studios, there is a brand that they are trying to that they need to fulfill with their content. So DreamWorks has its own brand, Illumination has its own brand, but Sony doesn't have a brand. And so, so those are things to be mindful of when you're approaching different buyers. So maybe, I don't know, Aghi and Alison, you guys want to speak to your studios and kind of the differences in why you choose the content that you choose.
Sure, I'll go first. So with DreamWorks, I do think we have a very specific brand. It's very comedy forward. So when we look at material, we tend to look for things that sort of fit into what we've done previously and have been successful for us. Comedy forward, great characters. And when we explain the difference about what we do and the comedy we look for, it's like when we look at a Disney project, whether that's TV or features, they make Tangled, they make Princess and the Frog, whereas we make Shrek. So what we do is we have a little bit of a left of center piece to our brand that we feel works really well for us. And so that when we look at everything, we look through it at that lens. Does it fit into what we do and what we do well?
I mean, I think with anything that when you're going after or wanting to either pitch to a studio or work at a studio, recognizing the content they're creating, and it's never a one size fits all. I think also being acknowledging and being aware of content that's already being created, knowing, there's a lot of trades out there that kind of tell you what's getting greenlit already. The resources are there. It takes a little elbow grease and some research, but the more equipped you are with understanding the creative competitive landscape, I think that will answer a lot of your questions on is my pitch or portfolio going to be successful at that particular studio. For a place like Sony, where we're platform agnostic, style agnostic, and story agnostic, that can be a little tricky for people. We are creating content on the TV side that is co-viewing, so that would be like Young Love, Simpsons, Bob's Burgers sort of content, or mature audience, which would be like Boondocks or BoJack or Archer. So we're working in those two groups right now, and then we don't have a platform that it automatically goes to. So we when somebody comes to pitch to us, we develop with that individual. So less is more for us as well. So we may only look for a log line or a couple images. I saw a question in there like, is images important or is art in? It can be. But if it's only your thing, if it's not your thing, like don't put it in there. Like it's a strength that you're of what your capabilities are is what you want to lean into, unless you have a partnership. And so knowing that we like to develop with, and then we go out and then pitch to all the different streamers and networks, that's something good to know. But on the feature side, we're buyers, and so again, we're the distributors on that end. And so I think, again, it's about being very specific and targeted. And I think it's any reason. It's like, why do I want to have my content and work with that particular studio? It's not just about what you're pitching, but I think the more that you know, I think that passion comes through, because it's a creative collaboration. At the end of the day, it's a relationship. So knowing why, and why now for your story, or why now this is a good fit, those are all important questions to ask yourself.
Thank you. And I'm going to jump in super quickly.
Jen, could I jump in with just one more thing that I would love for Aghi to speak to you about your question of kids versus adults, and within kids, there's kids and there's preschool. So there's like kids doesn't just all fall into one bucket. It's separated out, and there are requirements and standards and practices that have to be looked at. And that's not my area, but it's Aghi's area. So she could maybe just, before we move on to this, I thought it was important to acknowledge.
So with kids, there used to be just two buckets, right? It was either preschool, which is like 3 to 5, or there was 6 to 11. And the difference between the two, when there were just linear platforms, is that generally the preschool 3 to 5 had to have some sort of educational content attached to it. But now, I mean, things have changed quite a bit, and those demographics have sort of just, the lines have become blurred. So now you have preschool, which is 3 to 5. You have bridge, which is kind of appeals to kids like 4 to 7, 4 to 8. And then you have 6 to 11, but then you have all this content that's like, 11 plus. But that's generally how the demos break down. And I think with streaming, though, it doesn't really, again, it's not quite as hard and fast. But the one thing you have to do for, when you do work in kids for preschool, you always have to be super careful about the content you create, because you have very young kids who are very impressionable. And so you don't, you want to make sure that what you're presenting, you don't want to have something that would offend parents, because there's a lot of co-viewing at that age. And so you have to be very careful about that kind of content. So it's very, very specific. I don't know if that answers the question. And then there's adult animation, which is anything that's like, these days it's sort of hard to know, but it's like, 14 plus, but you also have younger kids who are also watching Big Mouth or, all of those adult animated shows. And that's fine too.
That's an excellent point to bring up. Thank you, Aghi and Jill and everybody. But yeah, absolutely. It's great to remember, okay, even though I think I'm writing this for adults, kids are going to be seeing it as well. There's no way to, to block that out. So it's an excellent point. Thank you. We have a lot of questions asking about, how do I pitch this? How do I pitch that? To whom? La, la, la. It's coming. It's coming. Slide, everybody. But see, people want the practical action steps. How do I do this? So, but it's coming. Don't worry, y'all. We haven't forgotten that.
And I think also for Justin D, I think we answered your question. Is adult animation something viable? Yes, definitely. Definitely. And then
it's very viable.
Absolutely.
And then I think one question was interesting, and I know Aghi, maybe you know this, but the question from Danielle, what do writers' rooms look like in animation? Are preschool different than adult? Because you're saying, you know, it's like you have to kind of more educational. Do the writers' room look differently, or act differently, or different people, or do you have different consultants in, different types of consultants in the?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, depending on where your show, again, it depends on the platform a little bit. If you're doing a show for PBS, you're going to have lots of consultants. And there'll be different consultants for depending on what your, you know, what your educational goal is for the show. So you know, if you are doing a STEM show or a STEAM show, which is science, technology, engineering, arts, and math, you'll probably have a math and a science and a technology. So you'll have a lot of different consultants working to make sure that what you're trying to do, what you're trying to teach your audience comes across. 6 to 11, you generally don't have educational consultants. Again, it depends on the show. If you're doing it for PBS, you probably do. If you're, you know, but most platforms from 6 to 11, the restrictions on content, they're not as great for the content for kids. Yeah, so that's what that looks like. Writers' rooms, it's funny because writers' rooms, they don't look very different. And educational consultants or other consultants tend to come in, you know, once you have a story that you want to do. Like for us, we always look for a great story. And then if it needs to have an educational consultant, or we will create that great story and then talk to our consultants about what it needs to look like in order to make sure that it's hitting the educational points that you need to make, but we also want it to be entertaining. Just because it's preschool, I feel like people think sometimes preschool that's very educational, but it's also, you know, they want to be entertained and they want good entertainment, and they're very discerning, that young audience, about what is good. But the writers' rooms are the same.
Yeah, okay.
A little different probably in adult animation. I can't really speak to that, but I'm sure it's a little more adult.
Yeah. Jen, should I go on to the next one? Is that
I
good?
think we do. I'm looking at our time already, and I'm going, no.
This is, yep.
Okay, so yeah, during the time of quarantine, is it easier to get animated films and shows produced versus the live action with real people? And I want to throw in a little bit of a side question as well, which I found interesting in the chat right now, the Q&A, excuse me, is, you know, how have video games kind of changed the landscape, or have they?
I would say, let me answer this question.
Please.
I would say video games in general right now have pretty much elevated what studios would want to do, what they're open to doing. I mean, I work with a lot of video game companies, with Access Studios, who has done a lot of work for Halo, has done a lot of cinematics. What we're seeing now more and more is that video game properties in general are being picked up by studios, or trying to get a certain property developed. And the audience that grew up with video games is now becoming a lot more mature, and their ability to watch content and not consider animation just a genre, but just a filmmaking style, has been contributed by playing these video games. So I can see a lot of these people. About 4 years ago, I would say we could have not sold an adult animated horror movie, where nowadays studios are pretty open to it because they see that audience having matured playing video games. So I'm not opposed to it at all. I think it's been fantastic.
Fantastic. So, and are we finding, well, we've discussed it a little bit already about how animation is really kicking up, you guys, as opposed to live action right now. Yeah. So do we have any other, you know, viewpoints that we want to jump in on this one, or do we feel like, no, we got it, we're good, keep going?
I mean, I just say that it's not that just because we're in COVID, we can continue with animation, which is great. It's not going to take any less time, but it's not halted the way that live action has been halted. I mean, the majority of studios were able to transition and do work from home pretty easily. There's certain aspects of the filmmaking process that you miss by not being in rooms together and having those, you know, hallway conversations and such, but the work itself has not halted the way that live action has halted.
Right.
Agreed.
Yeah, I've seen that too. Yeah. Okay. I'm sorry.
Okay. So, all right. So we're jumping on to the next one. So animation versus live action, writing for these. How is it different? What are the mistakes that you see where you go, oh, I wish I could tell somebody, don't do this, but do this. Now's our chance for the, you know, roughly 300 people listening in with their pencils and pens at the ready. Okay, so most people tend to know live action. That's what they've gone to school and learned all about, and they read, etc. So how is writing for live action, how is animation different? What are the things you go, oh, you need to do this, this, and this?
And I'm going to put us on the big screen for a minute. I'll go back to sharing, just so, since we're going to go.
Maybe I should answer part of that, just because I do represent writers and directors. In a lot of ways, I don't think it's any way different. Story is story. And I think if there's a good story that can be told in animation, a lot of studios want to know why exactly you want to tell that story in animation, rather than just going at it like, I'm going to take a sci-fi script and suddenly change it into an animated script because that's what they're buying. Primarily, there has to be a reason for it to be an animation. In terms of the genre itself, I don't think that matters anymore. In terms of the big studios, I would say if it's a 4-quadrant project that appeals to many audiences, it's a lot easier to get picked up. And again, every studio has different mandates. But for me, it's all about the writing. If I want to hear a project, if I actually respond to a project, I want to know that I understand it in a simple log line. If I know what the log line is, then it makes it easier for marketing to sell that story as well, because they have to sell it up the ladder. I mean, whether it's an executive, a development executive, to me, if you make their job easier, you have an easier way to sell it. And it also makes my job easier to sell that project.
I agree. Oh, sorry. I agree. I mean, I think there are differences in writing, but I think you're right. The core of it, it needs to be a great story, a great characters that you're following. And just because it's animation, you still need all of that. Otherwise you'll lose your audience. Yep. You know, as far as you know, turning a live action project into animation, there has to be a reason. You're absolutely right. It's like, why are you doing this animated? If this can be done live action, why are you not doing it live action? Because it's a lot of work to create an animated project. It's a lot of work, and it's a lot of work to do live action as well. But it has to have an element that I feel like is undeniably can only be seen. Whether it's a character, like a character's point of view, that's like a cat, or if it's a world that you need to build that you can only see in animation, I think, you know, those are great reasons to do it. As far as the actual nuts and bolts of writing, I think writing for animation tends to be a little bit more descriptive, because you need to convey what you're seeing. It's a visual medium. Animation is, I mean, it's a very visual medium, and you have to collaborate with artists. And so they have to understand what you're trying to do or what you're trying to show in your script, so that they can then take it and create, you know, give like birth visually to what you are writing about. So I think that's the biggest difference, is describing it. It's like you're telling that person what to draw. And that doesn't mean that they won't plus it or interpret it so that it can become even better than but they have to understand what you're seeing in order to create it or move it forward.
This is like a whole new universe that you're creating, because if I was going to write a movie about me and my 4 friends, Aghi, Tarik, Karen, and Alison, and it's our lives in New York and what it looks like in the corner coffee shop, but we kind of all know what that is going to look like, right? Even if our vision's a little bit different. But if I say I'm writing a movie about a flamingo and an alien and a fairy and a dragon on Jupiter, and it's this whole new world that we've never seen before, well, my vision of that is going to be really different from everybody else's vision of that. So I want to be able to convey that as best as I can, what I'm thinking, what I'm hoping for. And then you hope, as Aghi was saying, that people will jump on board and plus that vision and make it even better than you could have ever imagined, because they're bringing all of their talents and craft to the table.
Okay,
I
so
think people sometimes, oh, sorry.
See, this is so great. We have so much wonderful stuff to say. first of all, I would totally watch that movie. So yes, please do make it. What I'm hearing right now is that, okay, yeah, you can convert your live action idea to animation, but boy, you'd better be able to back up why you've changed it. Don't just say, well, because it's COVID, we could draw it on our, on our napkins and what have you. No. Yeah, so there needs to be a solid reason for changing it up. But it also, I'm questioning, but then could you still have both versions kind of in your back pocket, depending on with whom you're chatting? You could say, well, I do have the live action version, but really it would be so cool to do it this way with the animation. And in addition to that, one thing I'm wondering, and okay, yeah, it's going to be coming up in a couple more slides, but it's a free-flowing conversation. But so then would it be smart to kind of make some sort of a lookbook to go with it for these descriptions? Hey, it's kind of like the Minions and the Madagascar penguins, but it's on Mars, which would look like this picture, that kind of a thing. Is that useful, or is that too, I don't know, too much?
It depends. To me,
It depends. Yeah.
I mean, if you're an amazingly visual director and can present a lookbook that actually looks professional to me, I would consider it. Absolutely. If it's something that just put together as a project over a weekend and this is about it, and I wouldn't add it to it. I would rather have the executive imagine themselves what it could be. It really depends. I mean, Jill knows this. Some of the directors we worked with are incredible visual directors, and they do their own drawings. They put their own lookbooks together, and those are quite impressive. Again, it depends.
So don't just cut and paste stuff and put it on a piece of lined paper and go, what do you think of this?
I always say go with your strength. If you're a really great writer, put it on the page. If you're an artist and a visual thinker, you can do that beautiful mood board or lookbook to present your vision, but go with your strength. If that is not your strength, don't do it.
Don't do it. Yep.
Don't do it.
Less is more.
Less is more. Go with your strength.
Okay.
To the point with pitching, because Sarah asked this, when you're pitching it, whether a lookbook or she asked specifically, can you use a live action ripple-matic? Is that acceptable in pitching or conceptualizing an animation idea? So a live action ripple-matic to conceptualize an animation, is that good, or do you prefer to?
So this is what I was going to say. So for one, I think that by saying or answering the question, why is this animated? It's an important question, but that doesn't mean you have to completely go into the fantastical. I think it can still be rooted in great character and authentic to you, just like a live action. So I think there's a misnomer that it's animated, it needs to be wacky, splash and stretch and all these things. So it doesn't. Like if you look at the movie I Lost My Body, like there's a reason why it gave reason why it's animated, because you have a dismembered body running around a city. But outside of that, it was dealing with real human issues, and it was the effectiveness of that narrative of that visual that helped carry it along. So I think animation can elevate a narrative, and it's about how does the visual storytelling elevate the writing. When I'm looking at, in general, when we're developing projects, and this is a philosophy that carries from one of our production designers, Justin Thompson. I think even when we're kicking off artists, I'm not looking for like art that has been curated from other studios. So here's some Minions, here's some Disney art. Like what I think is more effective is the live action reference, whether that's the color palette that you're trying to figure out, whether that's the cinematography, how do you want that to carry through? And even to the point of like, what do you think your character? So if you don't have a designer, like put some actors, like I want to cross between this type of actor and this kind of actor kind of meshed together. I think you can really build a really strong pitch based off of pulling these cool live action references. And I honestly think it's better to, unless you have a set look look that you really want on a drawing illustrative standpoint, I would, unless you don't, if you don't have that, steer clear of putting any illustrative work. Stay in the live action space.
Got it. Okay.
Boy, I love what I'm hearing on this, because I know I personally think of pitching different projects that they are completely separate things, that there is no, no Venn middle diagram part of it. But you're telling me that, okay, there is a lot of crossover from whatever live action stuff we've already got prepped, which, I wish we could see all of our audience, because they're going, okay, I'm ahead of the game. I'm better off than I thought I was. Please.
I was going to say, yeah, I think you need to be open to the evolution and to where your project can go. So there's times where people might pitch a feature to us, we acquire it, and then after developing for a while, it might be better suited for TV, or or vice versa. So, and then I think ideas evolve. As I'm working on my own short, and I'm directing, and it's one of my ideas. Like I had a specific vision, and now I'm realizing I'm having to throw out a lot of that specific vision because it wasn't going to work with how I wanted to animate it. It wasn't going to be clear. So I think I know that oftentimes when we pitch, these are our babies. But even if you look at the story behind Queen's Gambit, I think the guy that created that show pitched that show for years, and nobody bought it. And so I think there's times where, one, you can't get discouraged. We're just humans on the other side with opinions. And if you feel really passionate about it, don't throw it out, but maybe it needs to be evolved, whether that's evolving with the time or evolving with all the knowledge and research that you've done, or maybe it just needs to take a breather, and maybe you need to work on some other things in the meantime. But I think it's not being overly precious and not just having the one idea. I think it's and also being open to the feedback and the dialogue is really important in the evolution of your ideas.
I think that flexibility you're talking about, and also the way projects can bounce back and forth. I don't know if, because we have 10 minutes more, and we have 3 more slides. Yeah, exactly. Just didn't want to. But I think what Alison, what you said kind of ties Jen right into this slide pretty well, right? So
absolutely. In fact, that was the one I have up, next to the computer on the phone, where I'm scrolling through going, let me look at the next one. But yeah, one thing that I was interested in that we started to touch on. So yes, we can convert live action to animated. Okay, check that one off. Film versus TV. I want to jump on that in a second. But so do you need to have everything totally, completed over into animation or into the TV? Or can you say, here's my original idea, but now I'm working on it, and this is where I think it needs to go to become an animated project? You're
talking about live action, right, Jen? Like a live action idea. And
thank you. Yeah. So yeah.
Live action.
I've got my 100-page live action script right here, but we're changing it now to animation. How far along does that need to be in the conversion process before, we bring it to Aghi, because it's for 4-year-olds or what have you,
Well, I think I think when you go into pitch, you want a very clear idea of what you're pitching. So if you're pitching something that has a great story, great characters, has, and that the executive can see works in animation. I wouldn't say, and I wouldn't go in and say, I have a live action script, I'm converting it to animation. That kind of feels like, oh, you're settling, which maybe not a good way to go in. I think, again, animation, it has to have great characters, a great story, and a reason to be animated. And if you have all of that, I feel like, hopefully all of that is in the script. It doesn't necessarily have to tick every box, as an animated script where you're describing everything. But if the reader, if the executive can see where you're going with it, I think that's enough. But I wouldn't go in saying this isn't a live action script and I'm going to make it an animated script. It's just a great script with a great idea with a world that you can see in animation.
Right. Plus, the people you're pitching to, I mean, animation at studios and networks and platforms, those are a whole different set of executives than live action. So it's I can't even really think of anyone anywhere. Maybe you can, Tarik, where someone would do both. I mean, even in adult animation, they have there have been new people who have gotten these positions of being, SVPs, EVPs of adult animation specifically.
I mean, it's been to be honest, there's quite a few. More recently, I've seen more executives moving into animation that have been in live action, but for them, it takes them a while to get used to it. I mean, when you have people like Michael Milberg, who came from Bruckheimer, or Donald DeLine, and he moved into Illumination, you learn about these things through the process. And I think, again, it's all about story. If an executive knows story, I think he can be good in any, whether you're an animated company or a live action company, it doesn't really matter. To me, again, story is what dictates it, and a sense of story. That's just my forte on that.
And then, excellent, thank you. And then quickly touching on, is there a difference converting, film versus TV series to animated, film, TV converting, pretty similar, different? You tell me. Somebody tell me.
I mean, it's hard to answer because you see a lot of anime content that's now becoming live action projects. I mean, if you have things like Altered Carbon, at one point it was actually a live action feature at Warner Brothers. Then suddenly they were considering as an animated feature, and then suddenly ended up as a series at Netflix. So I mean, there's evolution of things, but I think the first instance is the story good? Did somebody respond to that story? And then the executive can then, as Alison said, sometimes something gets bought as a feature and then ends up in television later on because they couldn't find a way of telling the story in just 90 minutes, So I think that's just something that comes through the process.
Fair enough. Let me see, Michael, do we feel good that we can jump to the next slide? Because again, I'm just like, shh, between you and me, we're running low on time.
Yeah, no, it is.
Don't tell the others. Don't tell the others about that. I want to keep them longer.
Yeah, this one, and then the next one is going to be important too. There's some questions about the voice casting. I think we talked a little bit about pitching, but I think some people have asked. I think one person asked, can you if you are pitching, do you nowadays in this virtual world, and I apologize the person's name, but they're asking, can you pitch via Zoom? Is this more common, or are you still kind of doing it more of like the pitching, for the projects in person?
I can only speak for us. We are not doing in-person meetings. We are doing everything via Zoom, especially now. But you just get used to it. You just get used to it.
And
it's easy.
And they're asking, is there any advice specifically about pitching via Zoom, animation via Zoom or not? Or is it's basically a pitch is a pitch?
A pitch is a pitch. It's a little harder though, because, you don't have people, a lot of people will mute. So you're not getting a reaction. So sometimes it's kind of hard to know how the pitch is going, but it's, you do your best, and you hopefully you have your pitch down, and it's really, you're getting across everything that you need to get across about the tone and the story and the characters and like the world, and what does that, sometimes people will even say this is a rough outline of what that first season will be, or the second season. If you have all of that and it's getting across, I mean, that's what needs to happen, and keeping energy up, because again, Zoom is really hard.
I think that, and then videos, if you have video content, maybe X-nay that out. I think, it's really tricky having media on there. Like for Sony, we actually, when it is specifically TV, we have to go out and pitch too. So we go out and pitch to all the streamers. So we're pitching alongside with the creator. And from our experience of taking things out, the audio has been the wild card. So the more streamlined and just specific and to the point, I wouldn't make anything longer than 15 minutes, like leave room, like 10, 15 minutes max, like getting in and out of what that looks like, and saving room for conversation is really, I think, just because I think people are exhausted from being online all day too. So
Yeah.
Makes
make
sense.
it easy. Make it easy.
Okay.
Yeah, I love it.
One
Everybody's
thing I'll
laughing.
add to the pitching that I've found with some of the newer platforms like at Netflix or Amazon is, and I'm not saying that anyone needs to rush out and do this, but it's just passing on knowledge, is that they want to understand how is the content going to be made. So as part of our pitch for various projects that I have, we come in with kind of a production strategy. It's not that we have a committed animation studio, but we have kind of a methodology that we can share of, okay, so here's the content, this is what it is from a story perspective, but also here's how we're thinking we might want to produce it as well. Because a place like an Amazon or a Netflix, they don't necessarily have an in-house production facility. And so that would have to come from outside partners. So just something to be aware of, that sometimes that is different, I think, from live action, because I don't pitch live action, so I guess I shouldn't say that. But in animation, that's just something that I've found recently that makes our pitch stronger.
So if I could say that back to you, because I found that I find all of this interesting, obviously. But so you would want to go in there and go, here's the story, here's, what we're expecting, here's probably our target age range, audience, kids versus adults, etc. But then as part of an animation pitch, which would be similar, I would think, to kind of a show with a lot of visual effects, you would say, hey, it's a similar tone and style to these shows which are produced by this animation company, this studio. So we're thinking to go with that company, with whatever that is.
Yeah. Something like that. So, I brought in one of Tarik's clients, Access Studio, on a project of mine. And we had some very initial rough discussions with them about, here's the content. This is kind of what we're thinking. We also had some discussions with Epic about their Unreal Engine, and they would be interested in making tools for us. So it's not that we've gone and set any arrangements or signed papers or anything like that, but coming into Netflix to be able to say that I have that has been, I think, productive for us. I don't know, Tarik, if you want to expand on that, since you work with different animation studios.
No, I think it's very helpful. Last year, for example, we ended up, during the pandemic, a lot of animation content did end up getting sold, and we sold one to Netflix, but we came in with a studio. It was actually Access at that time. And then another project, we came in with Studio Abel and Baker out of Spain, and we had some VIS development in place before we even approached the studio. So it was a much easier step for Netflix, for example, to say, hey, we'll give you guys 25 million to do this, because we had a complete plan how to do it, how to put it together. So it was much easier for them to actually agree to it. Does that happen a lot of times? Not all the time, no. But sometimes it does help that they know that you as a producer, Jill, for example, know what you're doing, that you know how to approach it. And again, the pitch is very important. One thing I noticed on the pitches, when we practice the pitches, a lot of times the directors will rather look at the screen and read off their pitches. So there's no interconnection with the person across the screen, so one of the things, feel comfortable looking at people, feel comfortable interacting, because it feels you're kind of distant and you're not interacting, you're not answering people's emotions, you're not reacting to someone laughing, you're not, so it's good to connect with people. That it helps out a lot.
Yeah. And I also think you need to, I don't think you always need to have that animation studio attached, because at least for us, we like the flexibility of figuring out how to make it. And I know that I don't want to speak for Netflix because I don't work for them, but, they're building a very beautiful animation studio. And so there are a lot of stuff that they can't do everything in-house, but they will be probably doing certain things in-house. So, you have to just make it as flexible as possible to whoever you're pitching and kind of know exactly what they need. So sometimes they'll want a production, an animation studio, and sometimes, they may feel like, oh, this would be better done in-house, or we want the flexibility to explore the look and,
Exactly.
yeah.
Well, and I think that speaks to no matter who you're pitching, whether you're pitching live action, whether you're pitching animation, is to do your research before you walk into the room, the real room or the virtual room, so you know who the buyer is, because everybody's going to want something a little bit different. And it's so much easier now to do that research, go online, dig around, talk to your friends, find out who people are, so that you're coming in educated and not uneducated, because I think that it makes a better presentation if you look like you know what you're talking about and know who you're talking to.
And watch their shows, because if you know what people are doing out there, and again, that's exactly what Jill said, do your research, but watch animation, watch the shows that they're doing, look at what the competitors are doing, like Alison said earlier, because you want to know what's out there, what you're up against, and if they have a brand that they're looking for. So if you have something that you think, oh, this fits their brand, and they have nothing like it, that's their white space, like whatever that is.
So I want to jump into specifics really quickly if I can. So what materials should you have prepared? What action steps you, the creator, can take now to really get to the top of the pile? We've been talking about a lot of it, but I kind of want to, put it in some bullet points, kind of a feeling right now, because people are, their hands are cramping up. They're taking so many notes. So we've talked about, obviously, okay, yeah, you can do your research. Hello, I think y'all have a little time to watch some shows and figure out which are the comparable ones and which ones fit where with what you're doing. We talked about the script. So obviously you can figure out why it should be animation, adjust it so you've got much more description going on for the animated parts of the script. Let me see. If you're strong with artwork, include some artwork. But what else? What else do we need to have prepared that, could be different from live action? And we know, like, some things you're going to need to hire other professionals to do. If you want it to look like, you're not an artist, but you want to create that look, well, then hire somebody who does that. Hire the designer, please. But what can you do now, sitting, in your very comfy office chair? What can people do while they're at home, in addition to watching the shows and doing the research, etc.? Take it away, everybody else.
This is basically, it's what you can do during quarantine.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
Well, I think,
let me answer like one thing on this one. I mean, I see it from my director clients. A lot of times they're actually spending time, if they have an idea, they're spending time on Instagram. They're spending time looking at different artists, their different styles, and a lot of them are international artists that can be out there. So if they have an idea, sometimes they reach out to that artist and say, hey, can you guys do a keyframe shot, something like in that art. So it shows that they're more engaged, and when they walk in, that's one way. But the most important thing is, it's the script. As a writer, you have to present an incredible script, even when you go to a management company or an agency, and that's the first step.
Excellent, thank you. So we're all knuckling down on our scripts, and we're checking out people's Instagram feeds. I know, Michael, you've recommended Fiverr with 2 R's if you're looking for designers to help you with your artwork, if that's not your strong point. What else? Jill, Alison, Karen, Aghi, do you have anything else that you're like, ugh, we forgot about this? Or do you even, because one thing that we talked about briefly and we have on another slide is the importance of voice casting. Would that be something that would be interesting and different if you've got some professional voice actors doing a quick scene?
No.
No. And that's thanks for coming, everybody.
Unless you have like The Rock doing it, I'm just not sure how that's going to help you. I mean, I think that's what we do, is we can find that those voices that can really bring it to life. If there's, and what's that, if you have celebrity casting, you know, maybe, I don't know. I just don't know. I don't know that would make a difference. It's all about the material and the project. And, you know, again, do we think it fits into our brand, and do we love the characters and comedy and the concept?
So that same as live action, basically.
Yeah.
Your items at this point are make sure you got the best version of your script out there and that it is brilliant.
That's
Do
right.
your research on who are your target companies and why,
Mm-hmm.
and get yourself going in the door. Okay. Do we have any other additions to that, or, you
I
know?
would say like with the voice cast, you know, it's like particularly once the movie has been greenlit, that's where I definitely go from like marketing distribution, similar to like having a big star attached to live action. You know, voice cast is important. I mean, you would always think, let's say, you know, the characters themselves, like when you look at the Addams family, Gomez and Morticia and Wednesday Addams, they're their own big stars in themselves. However, being able to attach Oscar Isaac or Charlize Theron or Snoop Dogg as Cousin Ed or Bette Midler as Grandma carries a lot of weight, you know, when it comes down to actually marketing. Like, you know, pitching might be, you know, I'm assuming if you get them early on and pitch to help with the pitch, I'm sure, but the voice cast, similar to big cast, makes a big difference. And also just to keep in mind too is the openness of like, obviously English language is not around the world. And, you know, when you're going, you know, when you're encouraging distributors to go, they should definitely pitch it with a local voice. You know, when Addams Family, the Italy office that we worked with, they found that I've never heard of some of these actors, Luciano Spinelli and Miranda Berti and Eleonora Gaggero. I have no idea who they were, but they were huge celebrities where they actually had like a premiere and red carpet just for the voice cast, which got so much awareness for the film. And that's something from a marketing distribution we always try to push for, and we try to work closely with production when they start recommending, you know, certain cast. We're like, okay, we know we can actually work with this cast because they're really helpful publicity-wise to promote it. That comes in handy. So voice cast will come in handy once, you know, it's greenlit, and then the marketing distribution, you know. But obviously, Aghi, you're saying like from pitching, you know, it's like it's the idea. At the end of the day,
It's the idea. Yeah.
right? You know,
Idea.
It really is.
Everybody's going, yes, yes. We've said it 50 times. Work on your idea, people.
Yeah.
That's what's going to grab our attention and make us go, oh, yes, we must work with you. This is perfect for us.
Yeah, and to that point, someone Harrison on in the Q&A is asking, you know, for casting questions, what is the biggest thing you look for when casting animation roles? You know, how many voices do you listen to, and what trends are you seeing in authentic, diverse casting?
I can take this if you want.
Yeah.
I mean, just to riff off of the celebrity thing as well, just from definitely in the series space, it seems like we are starting to trend more toward having our main cast be sort of more celebrity oriented. But there are some pitfalls with having celebrities. I understand it's a big marketing thing. It adds cachet to the project when we go out, you know, to sell it, knowing that is our goal. But when you have celebrity talent, the production issues are that, for example, they typically wouldn't be able to do more than one voice. So they can do their voice or that character voice. But so typically in series television, it's best, I like, when we have there's a whole strata of professional voiceover actors all over the world. And, you know, I mean, there are SAG and AFTRA rules and about how many voices people can do, but like you'd want mostly to have a professional voiceover, definitely for secondary characters or ancillary characters, because you can get one actor to do multiple voices and you don't pay, you only have to, pay, like you get the first two voices for the same rate, and then the third voice is only 10% more. So you sort of get more bang for your buck when you're using like standard, you know, professional voiceover actors. What was the question? Sorry, Michael. The question.
Well, it was, you know, Harrison was asking, you know, just like, you know, what are the type of, you know, it's like, what are you looking for? Also with like authenticity or diversity in casting now, is that?
Yep.
It's big.
Yeah.
It's we're trying to be, you know, we want to cast authentically. We listen to, gosh, I mean, it could be anywhere from 50 to 75, 100 people. So it's a long process, and it tends to be, it's very interesting, the voice casting process oftentimes, and correct you guys, you executives, they like to be involved in this piece of it. This is a huge piece of the puzzle, is making sure that everybody is happy with the voices. And when we do this, it's a whole process. Like we usually will typically have a rough idea of what the character is going to look like, if not a close to final reference piece of art. And then what we'll try to do is listen to the voice of who's reading and have that image up in front of us so that we can sort of visualize, oh, well, that voice coming out of that piece of art or that character makes a lot of sense for us.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think just to add, or just, we are concerned about like making sure that what's in front of us is diverse, first of all, and that the voices are diverse. I think that it kind of goes across the board, with not only in terms of like the voice actors, but also the people who are telling the stories. So it's the writers, it's the directors, it's the actors. So, we always want authenticity to our stories. And I think, that's voicing is one part of it.
Got it. Okay, no, that's perfect. I think, Jen, that's everything in voice casting. I think we're, now on, just more of like, we're kind of at the end. I know we've kind of gone over, unless there's any other questions we should ask, or, it's like, is there any?
We haven't gone over. Absolutely. Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, wow, my head is almost bursting. We have learned so much and had such a great conversation. Thank you so much. So yeah, check it out, everybody. Take our survey. Yes, please. So we're about to put that in the chat. Michael, do you have that? I have it ready.
If you have it, otherwise I'm going to stop sharing as I pull up my desktop. Do you have it?
Oh, fingers are crossed. I'm about to put it in the chat, everybody.
Okay, perfect.
And
So
I'm sending it to all panelists and attendees, and paste. Okay, fingers crossed, everybody. There it is.
Yeah,
So please take that, because check it out. Final draft. We have 4 full downloads to be giving away, but you got to fill out our survey. Yes, please.
Perfect.
And here we are, everybody. LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Yes, please do follow us so that you'll know about future panels. And we do have our website as well. I'm delighted. We just got that up recently. We are at www.businessofcreating.org. Thank you so much, everyone. And a huge shout out to Enid and Kat and the Writers Guild Foundation for being amazing hosts. Everybody check out their website, check out their library hours. They are an amazing resource for all things story oriented, since we know now that's one of our main things to keep working on. Everybody, amazing, amazing, amazing. I can't wait for animation part 2.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye,
Bye.
everyone.
Thank you.
Take care.